loneliness. I have a complicated relationship with loneliness. I was a part of the group of people that ended up experiencing COVID the end of my 8th grade year into my freshman year. And as an understatement, it was really weird. I grew up watching Disney movies and like slice of life, teenage dream, high school is great kinds of movies. And so, naturally that's what I sort of expected high school to look like. I live in a very small town in the middle of nowhere. It's a good, 40-minute drive to get anywhere, which is definitely not as middle of nowhere as it could be. But I go to school in the city, and it's definitely more middle of nowhere than that. And I had a very strange high school experience. My grade, I graduated with 49 people in my class. From the age of, from like 5th grade all the way up to high school, I could name everyone in my grade, first and last. And there were people that, moved, who came and went, who sort of cycled through. But for the most part, I'd say once I hit freshman year, I was with the same people. The exact same people. I'd say even before that. Well, no, 8th grade caused a lot of people to drop out. So yeah, from freshman year onward. And I was the kind of person who would jump around friend groups a lot. In elementary school, I'd say I was pretty popular, right? I was very outgoing, I was very loud. I was one of those people who talked a lot. It was always really, dramatic about everything. I was popular because I got detentions a lot, mostly for talking. That was, the cool thing to do. And my friends would, wait by the entrance to the playground for me whenever I went to recess late because of a detention or something. And when I got to middle school, I pretty much the first day showed up, how I was in elementary school. I didn't get the memo that it was time to change. Time to, be all weird and grown up. In, 6th grade. And very, very quickly, everything flipped upside down, right? I started being bullied. I didn't have any friends anymore. And out of desperation, I would just, hop around from friend group to friend group, trying to, find my people, right? Problem is, I think it may have been, 56 people at that point. It was more towards, the 60 but even then, with that amount of people, as soon as you, hang out with all of them a couple times, and you realize that none of them are your people, you're screwed, right? Because the older grades don't want anything to do with you. The 7th and 8th graders think they're, tough as shit and aren't going to interact with you for anything. So once you try everything and nothing works, what do you have left to do? I don't remember when it was exactly. It was definitely later in high school when I sort of finally realized and accepted where I was and who I was to everyone else, right? I had been outed by an acquaintance, 8th grade, before we went online. And so everybody knew I was queer. I didn't know that I was like a lesbian at the time. I thought I was bisexual, I think. But everyone knew I was, weird. And I sort of started to try dressing the way that I wanted, which was different, and weird. I got really into anime over COVID. It was a huge escape for me. I watched a lot of anime. So that made me weird, because it wasn't like a super cool, popular thing, right, when I was in high school, which was only a couple years ago. My freshman year, no one really talked to each other, unless you had like a pre-established sort of clique that you were a part of. No one really, once the things were established, right, nobody went between, nobody, you know how it is. And I didn't have that, so I did go between. And people very quickly started to realize that I was kind of desperate, I got this shirt. It's really cute, but it's too small. So I don't know what to do with it. But anyways. Sophomore year, I had a pretty good friend group. Well, I had a friend group. It was good at the time, right? Looking back, I should not have done that, but. And then something happened between me and at this point I started realizing that I didn't really like men. But I was also really desperate to mostly lose my virginity. That's a huge thing in high school, right? Is if you're still a virgin by the time you graduate, then you're super lame. Hi, kitty. So I was really desperate. And one of the friends that was in the group, I knew he had a crush on me, and so I asked him out. And at the beginning, I was the entire time. Stop that. The entire time, I was very open about not really being romantically interested in men. Because at the time, I just thought that I was aromantic, right? Because the only option is to date men. I just thought I was aromantic. And I was very honest about that the entire time we were, having relations. Ew, that sounds so gross. The entire time we were hanging out. I'll say that. Ew. Gross. Anyways. I was very honest about it. From the get-go, I was like, I don't think I'm romantically interested in anyone. And I only want you to say yes if you, understand that, and if you're okay with that, and all this stuff. He was like, yeah, of course. And then a couple weeks later, he was like, we were in the car, and it was very obvious that he was like, this is a date, right? And I was like, this is not a date. And I explained to him, I'm like, look, I'm not gonna date you, right? I'm not romantically interested in anybody. I explained what gray romantic was and what aromantic was, and I was like, I think that's me. And he was like, okay, I understand. But what if someday in the future I want to ask you out? I was like, nope, that's not how this works. And, long story short, it didn't end up working out, right? Because he just didn't, he refused to accept me for who I was at the time. And after all that happened, he obviously, the only logical thing to do is to spread insane rumors about me. So he did that. He spread a ton of rumors. And at that point, I was like, it's whatever. There's so many rumors about me. I really didn't care. It was just kind of annoying, But the rumors he was spreading was that, like, I was heartless, I was, like, a whore and a slut and all that stuff, which had already been established by my classmates. And the friend group that I was a part of, not only because of what what happened between him and I, but also because one of the other people started dating this guy, and he would hang out with all of them while I was not really invited to things anymore, so he kind of replaced me, and I was just sort of like, shunned, and that's fine, whatever. Junior year comes around, and this guy that I dated in, like, 6th grade, we start hanging out again, and we, like, do some stuff, and I very quickly realized that that's not gonna work out. And at the time, I also had a friend from France who was a foreign exchange student. She actually, like, came up to me in the bathroom and just sort of started talking to me, and we immediately hit it off. I still talk to her sometimes. I love her, and I think about her all the time. And it was through me hanging out with her that I slowly started to realize that I just don't like men. And she actually was the one who encouraged me to, like, be honest with my 6th grade boyfriend, who I was, kind of trying to rekindle things with. It was really weird. Don't do that. And she was sort of encouraging me to be honest with him, and so I did. I told him, I was like, hey, I think I'm a lesbian, or I think the words I used specifically were like, I think I want a girlfriend, or something like that, which was also really awkward. I didn't know how to I didn't want to admit at the time that I was a lesbian, because that would mean that I'm not attracted to men, right, which I'm not, but it's really, really hard to admit that in a world where men are literally everything, right? But anyways, that happened, and after that, I was pretty much on my own until I graduated. At that point, I dated a pedophile my senior year. I had been accepted to the school that I really wanted to go to, and we met at, like, one of the preview day that I went to, and he was really cool. I mean, I thought he was cool. And at that point, I had been alone for, like, over a year, completely alone, like, not talking to anybody outside of family, and I did dance, but I wasn't close to any of them. I actually had a crush on one of the girls I danced with, and that was fucking awful. Don't do that. Don't have a don't. I know that it's, like, a canon event, but don't. If you can help yourself, don't crush on straight girls, especially not when they're Catholic. Just don't do that. Just don't do that. It was, oh my god, fucking awful. So awful. But anyways, I met him in preview day, and I was really, like, kind of in a really, really awful space. I didn't have anyone, and he really liked me, and I was like, okay, you know what, maybe I'm not actually a lesbian. Maybe all the guys that I go to school with just suck, right? Like, maybe I just haven't met the right guy. So we start dating, kind of. It's more like, it's like a situationship, weird, long distance thing, because I'm, like, my home is way away from school. So it was a weird situationship, and then he started to be honest about, like, his stuff, I really need to go to therapy. I've seen and heard such horrible, horrible things. But, at the time I was like, maybe he can change. Maybe I can change him. He has never, like, never done anything. He just draws a lot of really nasty stuff and reads a lot of really nasty stuff. And by the time I snapped out of it, I was really deep, like, in this relationship. And I was constantly telling him, like, you need to go to therapy, you need to, like, talk to someone about this. That isn't me. And I think he did go to therapy, but that was really awful. And that was the last time I ever dated a man. Very shortly after I cut things off with him, because pretty much as soon as I got to school, he, like, started invading my boundaries like crazy. He wasn't respecting me. He just was really, like, a horrible person. And very quickly I was like, okay, you know, you need to fucking leave me alone. And I cut things off. And then, like, a week later I started dating my girlfriend, and now we've been together for almost 2 years. All of that insanely long backstory to say that I have experienced lots of different levels of loneliness. I gotta blow my nose. Hang on, I'll be right back. I am very, very lucky. My parents are very supportive. Very, very supportive. So, in that regard, I was never completely alone, but on a similar leg, I didn't talk to my parents for years about anything. There was something that happened where my doctor, before I, like, changed doctors, was threatening. It was a whole thing, and my parents, now I realize they handled it the way that it should have been handled. But there were a lot of other things that sort of came up. I think that I might have ADHD, and I don't just, like, say that to be like, oh, I'm so quirky, I have ADHD. But, like, in school, I struggled really, really badly. My grades were fine, but especially, like, in elementary school, with all of the detentions, it really, like, isolated me from my peers a lot. And I didn't understand why I kept getting in trouble. I mean, all of my teachers were, like, you know, encouraging me to talk, but then when I talked, I would get in trouble. And I didn't understand, like, time and place, right? I was also late all the time in high school, constantly late to everything, which definitely was not helped by the fact that I fucking hated high school. But nobody likes high school, right? Like, that's just kind of how it goes. And my parents just kind of brushed a lot of stuff off that I kind of wish we weren't brushed off. That can be a different video, though. I love my parents. I really do. I love my parents so much. And I'm very lucky that I have my parents. So in that regard, I was never truly alone. However, when it comes to, like, social skills, fucking none. I'm good with people only because I'm, like, kind of funny sometimes, and am really, like, I try to be kind to everyone as much as I can. And, you know, that's kind of like the bare minimum. So, I mean, I get along with people fine. I did get along with people fine. It was never, like, a huge concern. But when I got to college, it became very apparent that I had never really interacted with people before. Like, I had never, you know, like, hung out with friends. I didn't really experience, beside that weird, like, thing in sophomore year, I never really experienced what it was like to, you know, have friends. And my freshman year, I didn't have any friends either, outside of, like, my girlfriend and my roommate. Just because I didn't know how to interact with people. And I read a book over winter break, this past winter break, called Sweet Bitter Song. And it's about Penelope, Odysseus' wife in the Odyssey, and one of her slaves, Melantho, and their relationship, like what it would have looked like if they were, you know, gay for each other. Really, really good book. And it sort of put a lot into perspective for me regarding community and the importance of, you know, having people, knowing people, having a community, how important that is. It was then that I really realized just like how alone I had spent the past, you know, 5 years-ish, give or take. I still struggle with talking to people, especially when it comes to like vulnerable stuff, right? I feel like that's just kind of how our generation is. We're not good at talking at all. Our generation's really bad at making friends and having friends and being social creatures, which is kind of insane because we are social creatures, right? And there've been a lot of like friendships that I've sort of kind of had over, you know, the past couple of years. And I watched a really good video. I'll put it in the description if I can find it or remember it. I watched a really good video sort of explaining this in detail, like why we're so bad at having friends, just as a whole generation. And it really like hit close to home. I've talked to so many people that just don't like care, right? Like just don't care. There's such a lack of empathy and there's such a coldness around like surrounding community. One of like the closest I'd say friends that I've had in the past, we weren't really that close even, but like when things ended they just like didn't care at all. I don't know if they've thought about it a single time since things sort of went downhill, right? Because they just we just don't care about stuff, which I think is, I watched another video sort of talking about this. It was just kind of like, I definitely feel like a trauma response to what's going on in the world. Caring is really fucking hard. Caring is exhausting. Caring is horrible, right? But it's also really important, and I don't think that anything is going to change if we don't care about things, right? This being complicit, I don't think, like, obviously isn't as bad as actively doing bad stuff, but it's sort of like being a bystander, right? Like, it's still really bad. And I think that caring about things is what changes things. Community, I also think, isn't necessary for everyone. I do genuinely, like, just don't like hanging out with people sometimes. I mean, I fucking hate hanging out with people sometimes. I just don't like people. That's partly because people just kind of suck now, especially, but it's also just because it's really hard, right? It's hard to interact with people. But, oh, my cat is ready. Come here. They're sisters. They love to fight. This is Spinach. She's covered in hair. I don't remember what I was saying. But anyways, community is important, and it's important to have people to talk to. It's important to have people to relate to. I think that it's important to have people that support your beliefs and your ideas, but also people that sort of challenge them and force you to think in ways you wouldn't normally think, which is something that our generation also struggles with. We don't like to be told what we don't believe in, or what we don't agree with, right? I'm not saying that, like, if you're gay, go hang out with MAGA, but I am saying that, you know, like, there's so many different people out there, and hanging out with the same people over and over again forever isn't going to expand anything. It's just going to, you know, reinstill what you already know, and you're not going to grow at all. And I think that we get really uncomfortable when faced with things we don't know. And we get really uncomfortable when faced with ideas that we don't agree with, without thinking about why we're uncomfortable with it or why we don't agree with it, right? And I've met so many people that sort of, like, you know, have that mentality. They just want to hang out with people that think the same way as them, and if you don't think the same way as them, then you're not worth their time, basically. And community, you should really be sweepers on. Trigger warning, there's a lot of really disgusting, horrible things that happen to Melantho, to the people that she's around, because they are slaves. It's a really hard read, but what it says about the importance of community is, and especially being a woman, and I don't say that as like a female, like being a female, being a woman, a trans woman, you know, like a cis woman, being non-binary, it all kind of falls into the same category, especially if you were born AFAB or are, you know, transitioning. There's being a woman fucking sucks, and we don't need infighting, first of all, but, you know, it's a really good book, and I think that it's really important as a woman to understand other women and to not be putting other women down. I mean, we already, being alive already sucks, right? We don't need to make it harder for each other. And it's really reshaped the way I think about everything. I think that we're sort of, I mean, obviously we're in unprecedented times, and the best way to combat all of what's happening is by having hope and by coming together, right? The whole point of all of this is to separate us. And yeah, I don't know. I never know when I make these videos. I really should start like scripting stuff. Actually, I should do that. But yeah, community is very important. And having a community does not mean you're weak. Talking about your feelings does not mean you're weak. It means that you're strong for being able to put that out into the world, because it's really fucking hard to talk about yourself. And it's also really important. So, this is dirty. Ooh, that's really dirty. Anyways. Yeah. Go to, like, your local farmer's market if you have one. Find online groups that you align with. If you are in school, look at, you know, online campus groups. And if there aren't any, start one, because it's really not that hard to start one. I'm in the process of helping start a fiber club at my school. Yeah, and don't be afraid to, I mean, obviously don't be afraid to be yourself, which is easier said than done, but don't be afraid to interact with people that have different beliefs than you as well, if it's safe to do so. Again, maybe don't interact with anyone who is, like, going to not believe that human rights are a thing. Maybe don't interact with those people, because that's just not safe or productive at all. Unless you're a professional and know what you're doing, because I've seen a lot of videos recently of people, like, not debunking, but sort of like talking them through their beliefs and having them sort of realize how insane they are. If you're a professional, please keep doing that. It's helping, but if you're not a professional, don't do that. Yeah. Be nice. Be open-minded. Don't shut yourself off to ideas you don't understand. If you don't understand something, instead try and understand why you don't understand it, you know? So, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that. Oh, like I said, I have a whole playlist of videos that I really like. I don't know how to make that public, but I'll make that public, because they're really good. And important, I think. So. Oh yeah, this is my first anime, by the way. It's very good. I'm not caught up on the manga. I read manga for a little bit, but I kind of just get distracted by the pictures And it takes me a really, 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 really long time to finish them. So I just kind of stopped. But very good. Very nostalgic for me. So, yeah, that's it. Okay, bye.